When one thinks of Russia, it might be easy to simplify the country as being Moscow in the west and nothing but frozen Siberian tundra to the east. It's a fair mistake, and many outsiders might make a similar characterization of the United States. But just as we Americans know that here in the US we have a distinct southern region, a Midwestern region, and a New England region to name a few, all with their own cultures, lifestyles, and backgrounds, so too does Russia. But as far as I've seen, I have not found a single map online that illustrates these regions effectively. So today we'll be fixing that. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. The heart of Russia's population lies in the west, what we might call European Russia or Central Russia, and it is here we find our first major divide. Central Russia may be divided roughly along northern and southern lines, with the lands of the north what we might call Greater Moscow or Moscovia being a highly urban and suburbanized region based around the hubs of Moscow and St. Petersburg, either dependent upon these cities or closely interconnected with them. The economy of the region is naturally diverse with a particular focus on high-tech and recreational sectors, though light resource extraction does exist within the more rural and boreal parts of this region to its far north and east. Geographically, the region is relatively flat with a semi-coastal culture based around its Baltic Sea coast and various lakes and rivers. Politically, it is among, if not the most socially liberal region of Russia in comparison to the rest of the country, receives perhaps the highest levels of Western influence both through tourism and foreign business, and it is an area of relatively low support for Russia's ruling United Russia Party, while also demonstrating itself to be a strong base of support for the Social Democratic Just Russia Party and the Social Liberal Yabloko Party, as well as the Communist Party. The key outlier in all of this would be the exclave of Kaliningrad, which is notably more conservative. South of Moscovia is what we might call the Greater Volga region or Greater Volgograd. And in many ways, it is to Russia what the Midwest is to the United States. While the US has the Corn Belt and Rust Belt, Russia's southwestern region is Russia's heart of agriculture and manufacturing, controlling the largest contiguous span of arable land in all of Russia. In terms of GDP output, it is by far the wealthiest or rather most productive region of Russia, not only producing a massive surplus of food but also contributing significantly to Russia's industrial, high-tech, and pharmaceutical production among others. Relative to the north, this region experiences a particularly warmer climate which, when paired with the hydration provided by the Volga River and its tributaries among others, allows the region to be as agriculturally rich as it is. All this being said, there are some outliers in this region both geographically and culturally. The far south of this region is fairly mountainous, extending into the Caucasus Range, and where we encounter a significant population of both Muslims and Buddhists in the Greater Dagestan and Kalmykia regions respectively. Muslims also have a noteworthy presence in the Greater Tatarstan area to the east, which is predominantly Turkic, not to mention a large and notable Finno-Uralian minority in what is today the Republic of Mariel. Taking religion into account, the southwest is also noticeably more orthodox than the comparably more secular but still largely orthodox north. It is fairly conservative and strongly supports the ruling United Russia Party. Pushing east, we encounter the Ural region, which too is split along northern and southern lines, and as we move further into the interior, we will find that the bulk of inland development is increasingly concentrated to the milder south, with northern lands having been far more inhospitable and difficult to settle for much of Russia's history. The lands of the South Urals are about as thoroughly Russified as Moscovia and the Greater Volga, and religiously are largely orthodox and spiritual with a largely Islamic subregion in the form of Bashkiria, as well as the eastern subregion of Altai, a predominantly Buddhist and agricultural region to the southeast of the South Urals. The South Ural region plays host to some of Russia's heaviest industrial and resource refinement plants. If the Greater Volga is the western half of the Midwest, with its combination of agriculture and industry, the South Urals are the eastern half, far heavier in their workload, in some places abandoned and left to rust, but also overlapping with the rugged, mountainous, and underdeveloped lands of Appalachia. Outside of its urban centers, the South Urals are mountainous, forested, and generally underdeveloped in comparison to their western neighbors, giving the region a hardier character. In some ways, this region of Russia might be considered a vestige of the old Soviet Union, being more disconnected from westernization than the Volgograd and Moscovia regions. We also find that new private business enterprises lack popularity in the South Urals, while the majority of the population supports many of the direct successors of former Soviet industries, and while the Communist Party does retain a good deal of support in the far east of the South Urals, the region still overwhelmingly supports the ruling United Russia Party. The North Urals are far more rural and underdeveloped than their southern neighbor, having a far harsher boreal and subarctic climate. Its environment is a blend of dense coniferous forests, towering mountains, and barren tundras. Ethnically, the North Urals are less Russian than the previous three regions, being peppered with various Uralic ethnic groups across its land, though Russians do still constitute a majority and the region is heavily Orthodox. The foremost industry of this rugged region is mineral extraction, whether that be in the form of mining, lumber harvesting, or most prominently, gas and oil extraction. Politically a very conservative region, the population largely supports the United Russia Party, but uniquely also demonstrates significant support for the ultra-nationalist Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, which, yes, I'm sure that name is probably confusing. Geographically somewhat similar to the Urals and in other ways a sub-region of Yakutia or vice versa, Siberia is far more barren and underpopulated than its Ural neighbors, being primarily of a tundra and boreal climate. Insofar as economics, Siberia's main sectors are mining and energy generation, likely having additional resources worth extracting but which have gone undiscovered on account of the region's lacking population. Here too, the ethnically Russian population thins out but still retains a majority, with indigenous Siberian groups constituting a large minority. Religiously, Siberia is less orthodox than previous states, with a large segment of the population identifying as spiritual. Politically, the region demonstrates lower support for the United Russia Party and significant support for the previously mentioned Liberal Democratic Party and Communist Party. An additional sub-region of Siberia would be the region of Tuva, encompassing the territory of the currently existing Russian state of the same name. It is predominantly Turkic and Buddhist. Next is Yakutia, which, as I said previously, might be considered a sub-region of Siberia or vice versa. It is a large region which is largely not of Russian background, but rather has a slight majority of Yakuts, a Turkic population. So that being said, the region is heavily underpopulated, with the Yakut population numbering less than 500,000, while the ethnic Russian population in the region is half of that. Much like Siberia, mining constitutes the backbone of Yakutia's economy, while pushing us even further into a colder, harsher climate and less developed environment, perhaps the harshest environment and conditions that Russia has to offer. We find yet another sub-region to the northeast, the sub-region of Chukotka, which is majority Russian, and though it shares much with these south coastal lands as well, it is subject to much of the same environmental conditions faced by Yakutia, and both are very religiously orthodox. Politically, Yakutia demonstrates strong support for both the United Russia and Just Russia parties, though Chukotka favors the United Russia Party far more. Finally, we have the coastal lands of the Russian Far East, what we might call East Moscovia, given its higher level of urbanization compared to its surroundings, milder climate, as well as its higher level of settlement by ethnic Russians. East Moscovia is notably more secular than its western counterparts, not to mention even more politically diverse, with just about every previously mentioned party receiving noteworthy support. Though of course, as is the case with virtually all of Russia, the United Russia Party still remains the dominant political force. The region's culture and economy have been significantly shaped by its proximity to and relationship with the states of East Asia, which, along with the region being the most maritime and coastal-focused region of Russia, led it to develop an economy primarily based around trade, transportation, and fishing. If we were to find an American parallel for East Moscovia, it wouldn't be California, but rather the Pacific Northwest. States like Oregon and Washington, which have prominent urban centers, but which are not as thoroughly developed or settled as their East Coast counterparts. This organization of Russia into these 6 major regions, Moscovia, Greater Volgograd, South Ural, North Ural, Siberia, and East Moscovia, offer an illustrative perspective on the regional distinctions across the country and the relationships that exist between them. It's also quite fascinating how thoroughly regional specialization has manifested within Russia, with our first 4 major regions essentially forming a self-sustaining engine that keeps the country moving and allows it to exercise a unique degree of self-sufficiency. The Greater Volga region is a microcosm of this, having a good deal of just about everything it needs, but most importantly, the food source needed to feed its population. It should be no surprise then that this region holds as much influence as it does on the national level. The developments occurring in the Far East are also quite interesting. Being so far removed from the major population centers of the West and being an essential outpost of Russian culture in the Far East, the region is certainly diverging and will likely develop a more boldly distinct culture in the next several decades. One might imagine that the cultures, economics, and politics of the East Asian countries will continue to influence the region, however, much would depend on future geopolitical dynamics, as well as the internal dynamics within countries like China, Japan, and the Koreas. What did you think of this breakdown of Russia's regions? Should anything be changed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The US of Z thanks for watching. Mr. Z, out.